Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our office hour number 31. It's all about ITBM Azure integration. We have our senior subject matter expert, Balaji, here to talk about all sorts of things related to Azure and the integration that we have. As a part of all the different topics that occur, the format is very simple. The first 30 minutes, the senior subject matter expert talks about what it is that we had asked them and invited them to talk about from a topic perspective. And the remaining 30 minutes is all about Q&A from the customers. For those who are listening online and listening to this recording, feel free to just go ahead and email any additional questions you may have after listening to this recording to myself, charles.rayburn@servicenow.com. And I'll try to get answers to those questions from Balaji and others internally back for you. So without further ado, Balaji, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Charles. Very good morning, everyone. So what I'll do is I'll just start off with a presentation. I'll explain the use cases, and that would take probably like a couple of minutes. And after that, I'll jump into the demo and I'll show you how to set up the integration, and we could discuss further. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Hope you could see the presentation. Charles, can you?
We can definitely see it. You're good to go.
Perfect, thanks. All right, so the first use case that we have is we have the product managers or service managers using ServiceNow for high-level planning, and we have developers use Azure DevOps to manage their day-to-day activities, right? So what I mean by high-level planning is you could actually, maybe let's say you're a Scrum program manager, or you're Safe program manager, and you create high-level epics and features in ServiceNow as a part of initiative quarterly planning. You actually go and create the high-level objectives in ServiceNow, and you push those data from ServiceNow into Azure DevOps, and your developers actually break those epics or features down into stories, and they assign them in the sprints, and they continue to work on it. Whereas the product manager or the service manager who creates those features and epics in ServiceNow do not want to go to Azure DevOps to track the status. So because ServiceNow is the tool of their choice, they wanted to see all everything that's happening in Azure DevOps in ServiceNow, right? So that's why that's one of the use cases why we build this integration. The second use case that we see more often is the developers use Azure DevOps for their day-to-day activities, and they get operational tickets like incidents and change requests in ServiceNow. So in those cases, what we've seen customers do is for an incident that is escalated in ServiceNow, they go and create a corresponding story in Azure DevOps, and they track the progress in Azure DevOps, and as the work is happening, they go back to ServiceNow and update that incident. So it's a manual update in two different systems. So that's the other use case that we observed commonly across our customers. So I'm going to summarize some of the objectives why we built this integration, right? So we wanted to make sure that there is customers don't do swivel chair updates in two different systems, in Azure DevOps and ServiceNow, for the same update that you have, right? And we wanted to build a seamless integration that works between Azure DevOps. So we also have one for Jira, which we covered in the previous session. I didn't have the slide updated, but yeah, we wanted to build a seamless system that will sync the work items between the two systems. Yeah, and it is a two-way integration. You don't have to do anything. It's all configuration. You just do the integration configuration between the two systems, and it starts working automatically without you having to go and build flows or anything at all. And we definitely wanted to make it easy to configure. I wouldn't say that we are 100% there. We are getting there slowly, but yes, that's one of the key objectives that we had in mind as we were building the integration. And definitely, as a part of excuse me, as a part of this whole process, we wanted to provide a quick implementation turnaround. Like, let's say, if you want to do this, I could set this up in a day. It shouldn't take longer than a day if you're familiar with how to set this up. So we will see how that works. Before I show you the demo, I just wanted to quickly give you a highlight as to how the setup works in Azure DevOps and how we've tried to match our setup with Azure DevOps, right? So this is the design in Azure DevOps, right? So the way it works is there is a construct called process in Azure DevOps. So that's where you go and define what are the various work item types that is supported, and also what are the fields that goes into each of those work item types, and what's the workflow or the state flow for each of those work item types, right? So as I get into the product, I will show you how this looks. And when you create a project, you actually create the project by associating them to the process. So let's say you create a project for the agile process. It means that you will have epics and stories available by default. Like if you go to the project, excuse me, sorry about that. So if you go to the project, you will have stories and epics out of the box, right? So that's the construct in Azure DevOps. So to match that, what we've done is we've created something called process mapping, which will allow you to say, okay, what table in ServiceNow maps to what work item type. And I also said work item in the work item definition, people get to specify what are the fields that goes into the work item type, and also the state workflow. All right. So, and then we associate when we import the projects from Azure DevOps, we actually associate these projects into the corresponding process mapping, so that when we import the work items, we know exactly what work item type goes into what table in ServiceNow, and the field mapping and the state mapping and so on. So we will see more on this in the product demo. So I'm going to switch over to the demo. This is my Azure DevOps instance. So let me switch to a different user who has more access. All right, so this is my Azure DevOps instance. This is the organization. And if I go to organization settings, you see there is something called processes, right? So I was talking, Charles, can you pause recording for a minute? I'm going to get some water.
Sure thing. Resuming. Go for it.
All right, so these are the processes that I was talking about earlier. And when we create a project, we will actually associate the project to these processes, right? So if you look into the process, let's open this up. So I have the save process. In the save process, you see that I have the work item types epic feature and also the user story. Now, if I go back and let's say I open the agile process. Okay, this is an extension. So if you look at the Scrum process, right? So if you look at the Scrum process, okay. So it looks like I've customized this one. So usually in the Scrum process, we just have the epic and the user story. So yeah, you could actually go and define what work item types are available in each of those processes. And under these work item types, if you drill down, you will be able to see what are the various fields that goes into the work item. And you also see the states, right? So if you look at this one, you have draft, ready, work in progress. So these are like customized options. Like I modified these ones. So the out of the box ones are the new active results. So you can actually go and modify the states based on your use case. All right. So let me show you how the integration is configured. So once you have the application installed, you navigate to the Azure DevOps instances. So we allow customers to configure multiple instances. What we've seen customers do is they organize their work. So these are called the Azure DevOps organizations. So people have multiple organizations set up within the same company. So we allow users to configure multiple organizations as well. So that's why we have a record called the instances, where you can go and configure multiple organizations. I already have one configured. I'm gonna quickly do another one just to show you how the setup works, and then we will see how the integration works and so on. All right, so I'm just gonna give some name, and I already have a connection alias set up. So what we provide in the connection alias is the instance details, the URL of the instance, the username, and the password. So if I open this record, so you will see that I have the connection. Under the connection, I have the connection details, and this connection details is associated with this credentials. So for the credentials, you will have to generate a personal access token and provide the username and the password. The username is going to be same as the one that you used to log in, and the password would be the personal access token. So that's how you set up the credentials. So since I already have that set up, I'm not doing that again. So I'll provide the API version. So this, as of now, we just have API version 5.0 supported. We just provide this for extensibility in case in future Microsoft comes up with a new version. We could definitely support both of those. And I'm going to save this record. So the moment I save, you notice that we have the URL showing up from the connection alias. And after you create the instance, you will have to hit connect. So when you do connect, what we do is behind the scenes, we check the credentials. We try to log in with the username and the password that you provided to this URL. And if it is successful, we actually go and say, hey, the connection is successful. So once the connection is successful, you will go and discover projects. So when you click on that button, what we do is we go and check all the projects that's available in the system, and we create a corresponding project record here in ServiceNow. All right, so you see that two projects are showing up. So let me open the same organization. So you see that this is the organization that I've set up, and I have two projects, ADO integration demo and integration demo project. So I'm gonna quickly switch over to the other instance where I'll show you how the integration works. So I've already done all these steps. I've imported all the projects. So I'm going to open one of these projects to show you how the integration is set up. Okay, before I do that, I wanted to highlight some of the things. So I mentioned that for every process in Azure DevOps, we create something called the process maps, right? So if you go to the instance, you see that there is a related list called project mapping. And under the project mapping, you see all the processes that we observed as we went to the processes option under the organization settings. So here, I'm going to open the process. Let me see which process is this project in. Okay, so this project is using the integration demo process. I'm going to open that. All right, so in this process mapping, you see that in the PowerPoint, I was showing you about two options, right? So one is under the process mapping, we have these projects, and we also have the table map. So that's exactly you see in this form. So you have the related list that says Azure DevOps projects. This means that all these projects that is showing up here uses the mapping that is provided as part of this process map. Right, these two projects will honor this mapping, right? So let's look at the mapping. So if you go to table map, what you're seeing is the mapping between the tables. So let me open this up. So what we are doing here is we are saying the work item of type user story, where as I'm importing it, I need to import it into the RM story table, right? And then the related list is showing all the field mapping. Let's say you have the title from Azure DevOps. So as I'm importing, I need to import it into the short description field. Similarly, story points goes into story points, acceptance criteria goes into acceptance criteria. So then there is also parent link between Epic and the story. So what I'm saying is the system.parent parameter in Azure DevOps, as I'm importing it, I'm going to go and seek a corresponding Epic. And if there is a match, I'm going to populate the sys ID of the Epic so that there is a link between those two entities. We will see that as we import the work items. So there is priority. We also support importing work notes. So if you provide system.history mapping to work notes, we do synchronize work notes between the two systems, and similarly assign to as well. So if you have users with sharing the same email address in both the systems, we automatically populate the user's name in the assigned to field as well. So, and similarly, state. So these are out of the box mappings. I didn't create these. The system creates them automatically as it creates the process mapping. So if I open the state, which is a multi-select, which is a choice field, right? So in the choice maps, you could actually go and say, okay, what field in, what state in ServiceNow maps to what state in Azure DevOps. I mean, this setting is not perfect because in Azure DevOps, let me see what setting do I have here.
And while you do that, Balaji, there's a couple of questions in the chat window really quick from Jose. I don't know if you want to take a pause to answer those.
Sure.
And Jose, if you want to unmute, if you want to ask those as well, we could do that really quick.
Sure. I think the easy ones on roles required to maintain the mappings.
So we have created a new role called the Azure DevOps Integration ADO int user. So if you use that role, you will be able to create the mappings.
And the other one is around personal access tokens versus impersonation. I know you, go ahead.
We did look into it as we were building the integration, but it was becoming complex. So for the MVP, we just went ahead with the personal access token. But yeah, if we hear this as as of now, we don't have a roadmap for this one. But as we hear more, we could check for the technical feasibility for doing this. I don't know if it's technically feasible to achieve this one, but we could definitely look into it if that is coming up more commonly.
Okay, yeah, I think because for our organization, the issue is the whole concept of personal access token it's for personal use. And if you wanted to either have the integration maintain the sync between both systems for, let's say, a team, right? That's no longer a personal access token. It's more of a team interaction, right?
I understand. So what we are recommending to our users is to set up a separate user for integration. So some of our customers have done that. So they create a user called SN integration user, and then they provide the personal access token from that user account. So when the update happens in Azure DevOps, you know that it is integration that actually updated that instead of saying which user. Because if we need to do it by the user, right? So we need to provide some kind of mapping between the users in two systems. So, and then, so let's say I go and update, Balaji goes and updates in Azure DevOps, in ServiceNow, then it comes back to Azure DevOps and says it was updated by Balaji. So I need to have some kind of user mapping. It requires that the user exists in both the systems. There were a lot of complications coming into place because of which we stuck with personal access token for now.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, I was talking about the states, right? In Azure DevOps. Let's see. Okay, so the states in Azure DevOps is draft ready, work in progress, ready for testing. But I have completely different. I can quickly modify that, but I'm gonna just leave it as it is for the demo sake. I'll show you as I configure safe. I can definitely bring that up. So yeah, what I was trying to highlight is the choice mapping, the state mapping between the two systems, right? So this is the field level mapping, and the related list here is the choice level mapping. So this is something that we definitely want to make it easy for the users. As of now, it's quite cumbersome to do this. You will have to look into the states in Azure DevOps and then what the state in ServiceNow and then provide the details. This we understand is complex. We are looking to make this process simple. But yeah, for now, this is the option that's available to our users. So you'll be able to provide the state mapping. All right, so all this is already available. I'm gonna quickly go and configure the project for import. So the way we would do that is you go and check these two boxes that says import work item and export work item and save this record. And okay, the webhook is already registered in this case. So what happens now is whenever there is an event in Azure DevOps, let's say a work item gets created or updated, we will receive the events in ServiceNow. And because the import work item is set to true, we will process that and process that value and process that story in ServiceNow, right? So let's look into this. So once you check these two boxes, if you want to continue to bring in sprints from Azure DevOps into ServiceNow, you check this box that says sync sprints and save it. So you register. So these are the steps, right? You register the webhook, and once you register the webhook, you set these options saying import work item, export work item, and sync sprints to true, and that's it. And the integration must start working immediately. Oh yeah, there's one step that I forgot. So there is a related link here that says import areas, iterations, and teams. So as a part of Azure DevOps project setup, we set up the areas, iterations, and teams. So we will need to import this manually for once. After that, there is a scheduled job which you could set up to periodically pull all that information into ServiceNow. Unfortunately, Azure DevOps does not provide us with a webhook to automatically create these, because of which we had to rely on scheduled jobs, right? So when you go and click on this option, import areas, iterations, and teams, what we do is we get those entities and we process them in ServiceNow. So you see that there are three related lists, one that says iterations, one that says areas, and the other that says teams. Let's see how this looks in Azure DevOps. If you go to project settings, so you see that there is a project configuration. Under the project configuration, we have iterations, we have areas. So these two are required to be able to utilize the Azure DevOps work items, right? So out of the box, they automatically create one. So if you don't create any other iterations or areas, we still would require you to go and import the Azure DevOps areas and iterations and teams. So that way we will be able to import and export without any issues, right? So once you come to the project, the first step is you do import areas, iterations, and teams. After that, you register the webhook and then enable these three options. All right. And then we have an optional team integration setting step. This would be required if you need to create work items in ServiceNow and export them to Azure DevOps. Otherwise, this is an optional step. So let me give you a little background on why do we need team integration settings. So for that, I'm going to go back here. So you see that in Azure DevOps, there is a construct called teams where you can actually go and create multiple teams here, right? And under the teams, you see that there is a configuration for areas and iterations. So if you're familiar with Azure DevOps, I mean, you would know what these are. In case if you're not, I could quickly tell you what this is. So these are iterations. So at first you have the project level iterations, right? So it does not mean that all teams share the same iteration. So these are at the project level, you create these. But team configuration is where you actually go and say, okay, this team actually works on these sprints, right? So you provide, so this is where you provide that option under team configuration. If you go to iterations, you then map the iterations saying, okay, these are all the iterations that this team is working on, right? And then areas. So areas are more like modules, right? So you could actually go and say, okay, these are all the areas of the product that this team works on. So you will be able to set that. As a part of it, you will also set up a default area. So when you create a work item in ServiceNow and push it to Azure DevOps, we use the value from the default area to create those work items. All right, so you see that we have three teams. Actually, we have 4 teams here, but I've created mapping for 3 teams. One is stored release, one is family release, and another is dashboard. So you see, let's open one of these. So I have an assignment group called dashboard created in ServiceNow, and this is the team coming from Azure DevOps. So when you do import areas, teams, and iterations, we pull this value. So I'm creating a one-to-one mapping between this team and Azure DevOps to the assignment group in ServiceNow. So once you do all this, in order to import all the work items that exist in Azure DevOps into ServiceNow, you will use the import work items action. So I'm going to quickly show you the list of stories in ServiceNow as at the moment. So you see that I don't have any stories. So I'm going to click on import work items, and I'm going to provide a date range. So we use this date range to pull all the work items that was created or updated in this between the start date and the end date, right? So we also use the sprint start date and the end date. So I'm gonna give a future time because I have some sprints in the future. So I'll provide these two dates and I'll hit submit. So what we do is we create what we call as import requests. We queue them up. So you see that there is import sprints is the first requested step. So once this import request is created, then we have an integration hub flow behind the scenes, which triggers automatically and then uses the REST API to pull the information from Azure DevOps into ServiceNow. So because I have more data, this is going to take a few seconds. So you see that it is processing. And once it is done, you will see that the state changed to complete. So as of now, whatever I'm showing you is the Scrum setup. So we have, I will, right after this, I will show you how to do this for SAFe as well. So I've got like 35 work items. So you see that it is linking the work items after the work items are imported. So what I mean by linking is it links the epic and the stories based on the link that we provided in Azure DevOps. Okay, while this is happening, I'm going to reload this list to show you. Okay, you see that the stories are imported. We have 31 stories showing up here. So if I go back in here, so I have 35 work items, like 31 stories and 4 epics. All right, so this thing is complete. Let me reload this page. Okay. So, okay, the epics are here, and ideally I would expect the epic to be linked to the story. Okay, so it was working when I tested before this demo. I'm gonna do that again. Let me see if it works this time. If I go to the groups. Okay, you see that the sprints are also imported. Okay, so I'm gonna, while the import is happening, I'll show you how the safe configuration is done, and then we could see how the integration works. All right, for the safe configuration, I have another project called the safe demo project. So if you observe, you will see that there are 2 additional fields that is showing up here, right? So we didn't have these 2 fields in the previous project, but in this project we have it. The reason is the process mapping, right? So I already have the process map created for the safe. So, I mean, I updated the out of the box one to utilize the safe mapping. So I said, okay, user story needs to go into SN safe story, and feature needs to go into SN safe feature, and epic needs to go into SN safe epic. So this is the configuration that I've done, and these are 2 projects that is using the using this configuration. So if I go into either of these projects, so I'll see those 2 additional fields, right? So we'll talk more about why do we need those fields. So the process is the same. You're going to need to register the webhook at first, and when you Let's wait for this to complete. Okay, the registration is successful. We've registered the webhook in Azure DevOps, and you check these two boxes like we spoke about previously. If you want sprints, then you will need to check this box. The moment you check this box, you notice that these two fields, additional fields, are becoming mandatory, right? So because the way safe works in ServiceNow is you have an to create sprint, you need to have an agile release train, right? So I have an agile release train created. So I'm going to provide that value. And we need to provide the iteration path, which is an equivalent of an agile release train in Azure DevOps. So what I mean by that is in the safe project, if I go to iterations, we need users to follow this kind of hierarchy. You need to have an agile release train. And under the agile release train, you have the program increments. So you could have PI1. And let's say if you want to have PI2, you could have PI2 under it, right? And then you have sprints under the PI. Or, I mean, okay, let me just go ahead and create.
And just a quick question too, Balaji. There was one from Jose. Is this a two-way integration?
It is, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
We will see that. Once I show you the configuration, then we can talk about how integration works. So we request, we require the users to follow this hierarchy. You need to have a PI, and then you need to have those sprints under the PI. We expect all the PIs to be at the same level, and you need to have a parent, which is going to be an equivalent of the agile release train. So this is also the recommendation from Microsoft. If you look at the Microsoft documentation for following safe with Azure DevOps, they have recommended the exact same pattern. So we expect users to follow this pattern to be able to integrate with safe. So I'm going to provide the ART iteration path, which is the same at this level, right? So at the project level. So I provide that and I save this. And I have 3 teams set up as part of this project. And I've created the team integration setting, just like how we did in the previous one. And similarly, you have to do the import areas and iterations. So unless you do that, you will not see any value in the iteration path. Yeah, because I've done that, you were able to select that value. So once you do that, you go and click on import work items. So the same rules apply. So you pick a date and submit. All right. So now let me go back to the previous one, previous import, and then we can check back on this one. All right. Okay. For some reason, the Epic link doesn't want to work, but yeah, let's check the Agile board for a moment. So if I go to Agile board, you notice that there were 3 groups, right? So that we had mapped to. So you see that dashboard is one of the groups. So as we import the work items, we also associated the sprints with the sprints with each of those stories, right? So let's see how the two-way integration works. So as I'm importing the work item, because I've created the team integration setting, the system also populates the assignment group automatically, right? So now, if I go and make any updates here, let's say CFD for Apex, I go and make any update, date from now to ADO. I'll put something in the acceptance criteria and I'll update it. So while that's happening, let me also add an attachment and also make a work notes so that. Okay. And so you see that I provided an update here. So let me go back to Azure DevOps and look into that story. So I did it for the dashboards team. So let me, oh, I'm in the wrong project. CFD for Apex. I would expect that update to be here by now. Okay, so in case if you need to troubleshoot, the best thing to do would be to open the flow designer and check what's the status. So like I said, we use Integration Hub behind the scenes to import and export. So Flow Designer is where we can actually go and see the execution status for the import and the export. All right. So it says that everything is complete. Okay, let me update this in here. Is this not working? So let me make an update here. Let's see if this works. CFD for Apex. What happened to the something doesn't seem right. Let me check. Okay, let me go back to the other project. The integration must be working. So let's look at the save port. Save.
While you do that, Balaji, there was a couple of questions that popped up. One, can you demo where you have an incident and you would push it to ADAO as a bug? And then two, from Jose, is this an integration only possible if you have acquired the ServiceNow Agile Development product module, or is this a connector / spoke?
It is available only if you have the if you have license for the Agile Development module. So that would be required. Hope that answered. Okay, so this is the I'll show the incidents right after this one. So I just wanted to show you the update. So I'm not sure why did it not work on the other project. So I'm gonna check this one. So let me open the safe project and go to the boards. Okay, so I have new. Let me close these. Okay, so I have new hire week 1 survey. So I'm going to open that story. So you see that I didn't have to do anything. I just imported the work items as it brought in. It brought in and associated them to the respective sprints. Even the feature association between you look at this one, right? So as I'm importing the story, I also associated these features with, sorry, these stories with the feature. And if you look at the feature is also associated to the Agile release string. So if the feature is associated with the Epic in Azure DevOps, even that association would remain as it is, right? All right. So let me make an update here. Update from now to ADO. I'll save this. And testing work notes from post. Let's say I add an attachment. Update the file. So let me go back here. So you see that the work notes update that I made came through. And similarly, the acceptance criteria came through as well, right? So let's say I make similar updates. And let's say I make similar updates in acceptance criteria. I mean, even if you want to format it, you could format it. We do honor the formatting as well. And let's say, what else? I could change the description. So whatever is there in the mapping that you provide, right? The field mapping that you provide, if you update any of those, it will make it through between the two systems, right? So you see that I made an update in ServiceNow, and then it came through in Azure DevOps. Similarly, I've made updates in Azure DevOps. Let's see if it comes through here. So I'm going to open the story. It does take a few seconds to come over. Let's see if the attachment made it. Oh yeah. So if I go to the attachment, you see that we have an attachment here. And if you add an attachment here in ServiceNow, sorry, in Azure DevOps, even that would appear in ServiceNow. Let's see. All right. So if you want to configure the assign to field is available out of the box. If you want to configure additional fields, you will be able to do that as well. If you have any custom fields, you could do that as well. So you were asking about the incident mapping, right? So I'm going to keep the story open to see if the update comes over. So I have incident mapping created in another project. So I'm just going to show you how that works. So I'll go and create a new incident. I have this group mapped, and let me provide a color. I'll save this. So you see that as I'm creating the work item, I'm assigning this group, and I provide the details. And if I go back here in ServiceNow, sorry, in Azure DevOps, and open that project. So I mapped that incident to an issue type, not a bug, but an issue type. So you see that the incident that I created, demo incident from now to ADO, is showing up here. And if let's say I make an updating work notes. I didn't map a lot of fields, but yeah, let me just show you the work note update, maybe the title as well, and save it. There seems to be something wrong with the webhooks. It was working when I was testing early today.
So that's the assignment group is associated with an ADO board?
It is, yeah. Let me show. So this is the other project that I was showing you, right? So I created this mapping between the team in Azure DevOps to team in ServiceNow. And then in the process mapping, I created the table map between the incident in ServiceNow to an issue type in Azure DevOps.
So you could map what about like a catalog task as a what? Like a,
You should be able to do it as long as it's
Mhm.
a table in ServiceNow and an issue
Mhm.
type in Azure DevOps. You should be able to do that. So it's a simple configuration similar to how I showed you earlier. Okay. Now I see why this is not working. The reason why this is not working is actually I didn't switch over to a different user. Like, so if you look at this logs, right? So it will tell you the payload is cyclic. So that's why I didn't update. Now I know why. Silly of me. Let me switch over to a different user. So that's why we recommend using a separate account just so that this issue doesn't occur to the users. So let me update. So I'm gonna say okay. You see that the update came over, right? So similarly, let's okay. So let's see here itself, right? So let me add an attachment to this incident. And save it. And let's say I update the state to active. Maybe I think I should show that in story because here incident requires certain fields mandatory for state change. Let me resolve this, right? So let me resolve it. Okay, you see that. So I set the value to active, and then it came and set it to in progress in ServiceNow. And if I go and also the attachment came through, if I go and mark it as resolved and provide some resolution code and update it, it should move to the close state. So this is the incident, right? So all I did was create the mappings and I had to add another business rule also in addition to creating the mapping because we have the business rule available only for stories, safe and Scrum. We don't have it for incident, but all you have to do is just copy the business rule that we have, change the table name, and it should work. So you see that the state got updated here. So let me go back to that the project that I was showing you earlier. So not here. So new hire survey. So let's save this. Okay, you see that the updates came through. See the short description got updated and the work note update is here. And attachment, let's say I do something different, or maybe in Azure DevOps. If I do something with the attachment, it should, let's say I remove the attachment. Save this one. So even removal of attachment would actually work. Yeah, you see that the other attachment is gone. So we do maintain that that kind of map between the two systems. So any questions? So yeah, it was a lot to cover in an hour. So yeah,
No, there's one question from Jose. Jose, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask that.
Sure. Sorry, I don't mean to sound repetitive here, but going back to the personal access token topic, what was the workaround you mentioned that others have done for overcoming the concept of a shared aspect of a personal token? And then two, where is that personal access token stored, and can it be stored in some sort of vault like Azure Key Vault?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way we store it, so we use the platform has a capability to store the attachment. Store the credentials, right? Let's say so connection and credentials. So we, if I'm not wrong, I think we hash it and then we store the password that that you provide in the system. So if there is a vault, yeah, that's a good question. I need to check with the security team to see if there is an option like that.
Thank you.
Great. I just launched the poll too for those of you who are still on the line. Go ahead and fill that out. Just kind of give us some feedback. Are there any other questions? We have about 4 minutes left for Balaji. You can go ahead and unmute if you want to just kind of ask them right out. You have a good weekend too, Sarah. Same thing, Jose. Got 3 minutes left. Any additional questions, comments? Awesome. Well, this was a pleasure having you, Balaji. Congratulations on the roles change as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through the Azure integration. For those listening to the recording, hopefully you found this valuable as well. If there aren't any further questions, I would say definitely have a great rest of your Friday and enjoy your weekend. Talk to you all later.